Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of Stanley and the Sea Can. So today we have another political rant, I guess, having to do with the assault-style firearms, weapons buyback from our Canadian government. So I've been seeing a lot of newspaper articles and different online articles the last week or so talking about the updated plans and status of the situations and everything else. So I've got some sources here like the Edmonton Journal and different government websites and things for proof. So I'm not just kind of making this up. They'll put them down in the description section of the video. Yeah, so one of the most interesting things here that came up and got my attention was reminding me that the exemption that's currently in place is set to expire on October 31st of 2025. So that's supposed to be for all of the civilian or individual ownership of these newly prohibited firearms from all of the Orders in Council, not just the May 2021, I believe. It's going to also cover some of the others as well. There might be some other exemptions in there or whatnot, but I think that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing here. It's just all chaos. What the news is saying is that the government claims to have taken 12,000 firearms from inventories of different gun shops around the country, and it cost about $70 million. But they've yet not taken a single firearm from an individual. I guess if there's someone maybe has done some sort of like amnesty or just like taking it in for no compensation, that could be something, but that's not covered in here, right? No one's doing that. So the interesting thing was that if you have access, you can see it online, the compensation amounts for the businesses for various types of firearms and whatnot, make, model, all these different things. Some of the bigger numbers were up around $1,200, $1,300 kind of thing, right? For an AR kind of thing. And so if you take that 70 million and divide it out by the 12,000, it looks like the government's paying about $5,833.33 per firearm that they've taken, expropriated, confiscated, whatever they've done, right? Which is substantially more. So I guess if we're going to get, an average of say $1,300 for an AR, and then it's $5,800 is what it actually costs, you get yourself about $4,500 of bureaucracy in there per firearm, which is, kind of sounds par for the course. So from the 25-26 Canadian budget estimate is the government's thinking that they're going to pay about $260 million to get 200,000 firearms away from private citizens, or confiscate, right? And so that means if you do the math on that, that averages out to $1,300 per firearm. Right? But if it's already costing $5,800 per firearm, that means that they're going to blow through their $260 million after about 44,000 firearms. So that's not even 25%. So that means that this is easily $1.2 billion project, if it even works, and if they get what they want from the people. So that's kind of what we expected, right? Another $1 billion blunder to have no effect on public safety. And some of the opinion pieces we can see, like this, the Toronto Sun and such has got some really good opinion pieces on this. And, they kind of point out the obvious that may not be so obvious, and that is that the bad people, the criminals and stuff, they don't follow the laws. They don't care. If you're setting out to go murder somebody, you probably don't care if you run a stop sign on the way. Like the laws are not you're working outside of the laws and outside of the legal constructs. So why would it make a difference to you if you have a firearm legally or not legally, right? Like they don't. So an interesting thing, there's a website called Blacklocks. And so they go through the business of Ottawa. Minding Ottawa's business is their slogan. So it's kind of like a report from the Hill and such. And you can only see a little bit of it for free. So that's the only part I'm going to quote. But they're saying in there that the government is worried that the program, this assault-style firearms program, faces a risk of non-compliance. And so through the paid part of that, which is like $300 a year or something, so you're probably not going to pay that. But it goes in to say that they had hired companies to do surveys and call certain Canadians and certain demographic groups in different regions and everything else to try to figure out what's the general consensus is on this. So if you have a firearm that was prohibited in the May 2020 Order in Council, so it'll be any of your high energy weapons over 10,000 joules, or AR-15s and their variants kind of thing, right? AR-10s, Matrix, BCL, like Black Creek Lab 102, NEA 102s, Stag Arms, all these different things. There was like a surprisingly high number of people said they were not interested in complying with the government in the requests to bring back the firearms. Or bring back firearms, or get expropriate for the first time, or confiscate for the first time, right? The government themselves are starting to see that this is not going to work, even if it's 260 million, which is their estimate. So it's obviously short by about 4 times or a bit more than that, what it would actually cost to do this. And this is only the beginning rounds of all these different confiscations and everything else, everything they've made prohibited over the years. It's bonkers. So their government's fearful that there's not going to be compliance. That means they're going to have to hire more law enforcement or whatever else to go out there and physically take firearms firearms from door to door or whatever, which is going to be, risky, expensive, all sorts of different things, right? Even then, if they do compensate or pay or whatever they're going to do, sounds like people just don't want to do it, right? So that's a big problem for them. So hopefully the government is reconsidering how all this is going to go down and how all this is going to work, because it's a waste of money. I believe one of these documents or whatnot, articles on the internet, they were saying that just the general consensus is that going after the firearms that are owned by just the general public who are vetted and secured and everything else is not going to help the crime situation. So the crime situation is the problem, not these firearms. And so the illegal firearms is the issue that people should be chasing and the government should be chasing. So previous liberal governments, it was very sensational. They're going to go after all of these illegal firearms and they're going to get them off the streets and everything else. But an interesting and obvious fact is that if these firearms that were prohibited in May of 2020 are so deadly, so dangerous, they need to be taken off the streets immediately. Well, at the time of this recording, we're in July of 2025. So that puts us at, a solid 5 years, even with bureaucrat time factored in there. We're still at 2.5 years of even bureaucrat time that all these firearms have not been collected, not been destroyed, not been confiscated or whatnot, and there's still not an issue. So it's interesting. The crime rates are going up slightly, right, across the country, and it's from firearms that are not registered or were never registered or were smuggled in from somewhere else. So it's an interesting issue. So Captain Obvious over here, it's my nickname, Captain Obvious. I looked into, so if firearms are being smuggled into Canada somewhere, let's say they come in across the border, right? They've got to come from somewhere, so they got to come across the border. So let's say we just look at land borders, right? So Canadian government website says there's over 100 land borders between Canada and the United States. And then a Google AI search says there's about 117 border crossings, land border crossings. So that's like you get in your car, you can drive across at some place across 5,000 plus kilometer border, which is one of the longest in the world, if not the longest in the world. So it's just bonkers, right? So we have 117 land cross reportings, right? I said, well, what if we do a full vehicle X-ray to scan like what's in the vehicle? So that way, if you're trying to hide something under your back seat or, in the trunk or under the carpet or whatever, right? In a suitcase full of dirty laundry or something like that. The internet says a full vehicle X-ray scanner can cost from thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So let's assume that those numbers are way out and each X-ray full vehicle scanner costs $1 million. So that gives us 10 times the AI estimate, right? And if you factor in bureaucracy and buying it and everything else, that's probably what it would end up costing, $1 million a pop to get it put in place at a border, right? And even if you had 2 of those things at every border of the 117, which, some of them are quite major, like the ones in, Windsor, Ontario, near Montreal, Niagara Falls areas, like those there have like personal experience with those ones. There could be like 10 lanes wide or something like that, right? Of different cars for different border agents. But I'm sure some of the smaller ones that are out in the middle of nowhere, especially the ones that are only seasonally operated even, there's probably only 1 or 2 lanes. So I'm no mathologist, but if you take your $260 million estimate to take back these 200,000 guns from private citizens and you divide it out by $1 million a pop to get one of these things installed, you should be able to get 260 of these like full vehicle X-ray scanners, and that would solve, you'd think, quite a few problems. There was an article in a newspaper in the Toronto area of a lady who lived in BC who was just out of jail, and she was doing that was her gig. She was smuggling firearms and drugs and all sorts of stuff over the border. And she goes into some of the tips and tricks of how to do it. And one of the things she said is you just hide it in your car. You find somebody who doesn't get pulled over, doesn't get questioned, and then you pay them off to hide it under your car. For a while, I lived in Windsor, Ontario, and they would warn people that if you frequently went to the States, like say you had a job in the States or you went to school in the States but lived in Canada, so criminals can see your license plate every day you're parked at a parking lot at the Wayne State University, and then every night you go back across the border, they could stick a little parcel of something illegal underneath your bumper or something like that, right? So then you technically muled it across the border, not totally unknowing, right? So if you had an X-ray scanner that would scan the vehicles, you'd find this stuff. It just seems so obvious, right? And I know these machines are already at many border ports. If you try to go across in a big party bus or you try to go across with transport trucks and stuff like that, they can ask you to leave the vehicle and they'll put your vehicle that you're in this big X-ray scanning thing. It kind of looks like a car wash, some of them grabbed the tires and slowly pulled the vehicle through the X-ray machines, and other ones just kind of locked the vehicle in a warehouse, and the machine would kind of on a gantry go around the vehicle and it would spit out images on the screen, and the officers can see exactly what's in there. What are you trying to bring, right? So again, it seems like it's just so obvious to me here that that I'm not a borderologist, I'm not a mathologist, but if you just look at the cars and look at the stuff coming across, look at the trucks, look at the cargo and everything else, and scan it, you could probably use something like AI to point out the things that look like illegal handguns and look like drugs and all these other things, right? So that seems to me like it'd be a much better use of $260 million. And it would create jobs, because now we're going to have more experts that are going to install, maintain, improve, operate these equipments, right? So we're going to get jobs out of this. We're going to catch more of these gun mules and get the stuff off the streets, right? And that's what everyone wants, safer streets, right? So anyway, there's my political rant for the day. And yeah, it's just frustrating beyond words that, you know, your tax money, you see it just going out the window. Taxes go up, 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 up. And what are you getting for it is less and less and less, right? Even if you think you're going to get your full compensation, I'm sure there's going to be some caveat in there that they're going to find a way to ding you, right? So there's reading the comments of some of the other videos that we'd posted on similar subjects to this. Some of the comments were kind of saying, like, as a firearms owner, you're responsible to kind of guarantee the safe storage and transportation of said firearm, right? So if you need to transfer a firearm to some sort of a buyback facility or confiscation facility, how does that look? How can you guarantee that it's going to get there safely? And then how are you going to guarantee they're going to store it safely within the rules and whatnot, right? Can you imagine that? Like, do you have a firearm shipped by Canada Post or something like that, or whoever, carrier, and it's known that it has to travel through a certain depot, so then some bad guys break into that depot and take the firearms, and so there you go, there's your AR that you've taken care of and had safely stored for years and years, that you're being offered a fraction of what you paid for it, and now that there's your firearm being used in some sort of crime thing because it wasn't properly stored or secured, right? And so who's gonna deal with that liability? So there's so many unknowns, so many questions, and it just seems that they're, you know, I'm not surprised, but it's just like they're running in the wrong direction and spending maximal amount of money to do so. So yeah, if you put some information in the comments of how you think the government could better spend $1 billion, put some anything. $1 billion, that would probably solve some housing issues, that would certainly solve some education issues, all sorts of different things that we have going on right now, things that actually matter, rather than running full speed in the wrong direction. Anyway, if you like this kind of content, feel free to write a comment down below, tell me your thoughts and stuff, and like and subscribe this video or our channel. We've got all sorts of videos now on different things, and Canadian firearms content and rules, regulations, all that good stuff. And yeah, that's about all I got. Thanks so much. It's like Grandma says, whiskey solves nothing. Well, Grandma's wrong today.